The name of this strain has confused people for years, because when most people hear GMO, they think one thing: genetically modified organism. They picture some lab-engineered Frankenstein weed cooked up by scientists in white coats. But that's completely wrong. This strain has nothing to do with genetic modification at all. It's a normal, naturally bred plant, and the real story behind that name is way weirder and funnier than anyone expects. And on top of that, it became one of the most beloved and influential strains of the modern era, all thanks to a smell that most people would call disgusting. This is the story of GMO. So let's tackle the name first, because it's the whole hook here. There are actually two different explanations floating around, and they tell you a lot about how strain names really work. The first one, the one you'll see on basically every dispensary menu, is that GMO stands for garlic, mushroom, onion. And that makes sense, because the strain smells almost exactly like those things. It's a clean, tidy explanation, and it's the one almost everybody believes. But it's wrong, because that explanation is almost certainly not the real one. It's what's called a backronym, meaning people heard the name GMO, smelled the garlic, and worked backward to invent a meaning that fit. The actual story of the name is much more interesting. So the guy who found and named this strain goes by the name Skunk Master Flex. Now, the original seed cross actually came from a Spanish seed company, and Skunk Master Flex was the one who hunted through those seeds, found the one incredible standout plant, and made it famous. And according to him, the name was basically a joke. Around the time he made it, there was news going around that the actual Girl Scout cookies, the real cookies the Girl Scouts sell, contained genetically modified ingredients. And since this strain's mother is the cannabis strain called Girl Scout cookies, he thought it was funny to call it GMO as a nod to that headline. He also joked that the plant grew so vigorously, it seemed like it actually was genetically modified. So the name that makes everyone think of lab experiments was really just an inside joke about Girl Scout cookies having GMO ingredients. Now I want to be honest, like always. Strain naming is folklore, not documented history, so we can't be 100% certain. But that Girl Scout cookies joke story comes straight from the breeder himself, so it's the most credible version by far, way more than the garlic mushroom onion backronym. Either way, the takeaway is the same. Whichever version you believe, the name has absolutely nothing to do with actual genetic engineering or science experiments. It's either a garlic joke or a Girl Scout cookies joke, and it fooled just about everyone who ever heard it. So let's get into where it actually came from, because the genetics are a big deal. GMO is a cross of two absolute legends. On one side, you've got Chemdawg, specifically the cut known as Chemd. Chemdawg is that legendary pungent gas strain, all diesel and fuel and chemical funk, and it's one of the most important building block strains in all of cannabis, the ancestor of things like OG Kush and sour diesel. On the other side, you've got Girl Scout cookies, originally developed by the Cookies Fam collective out of San Francisco with Berner and the team, and that was built on a cross of OG Kush and Durban Poison. Girl Scout cookies took over the 2010s with its sweet, dessert-like flavor and frosty, resin-caked buds, and the specific phenotype used here was what's known as the forum-cut Girl Scout cookies. So on paper, you're combining one of the gassiest strains ever with one of the sweetest, most famous strains of its time. Now think about what you'd expect from crossing gassy Chemdawg with sweet cookies. You'd probably guess something like a sweet, gassy cookie strain. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, the Chemdawg genetics took over and twisted everything in a totally unexpected direction. The sweetness didn't win. The funk did, and it created a flavor that nobody saw coming. And that brings us to the flavor, because it is the entire identity of this strain. GMO does not smell like candy or fruit or dessert. It smells savory. We're talking pungent garlic, raw onion, coffee, and diesel fuel. It smells more like roasted garlic than weed. In fact, when High Times judges described it, they reached for words like garlic and halitosis, which is a fancy word for bad breath. That's how intense and savory this thing is. When you open a jar of it, the garlic and funk fill the whole room instantly. And that's exactly why it also got the nickname garlic cookies. Now the science behind that garlic smell is pretty cool too, because it's not what you'd think. For a long time, people assumed a weed smell comes entirely from terpenes, the compounds that give plants their scents. And GMO does have a significant terpene profile, like caryophyllene, which gives it a peppery, spicy bite, and you've also got limonene and myrcene rounding out the mix. But that specific garlic and onion punch actually comes from a completely different group of compounds called volatile sulfur compounds, or VSCs. But the primary one responsible is a molecule called 3-methyl-2-butene-1-thiol, which researchers at Abstracts Tech identified as the key driver of that garlic skunk aroma in cannabis. And those sulfur compounds are literally the same type of chemistry that makes garlic and onions smell like garlic and onions. So GMO smells like garlic for the exact same chemical reason that actual garlic smells like garlic. It's not a coincidence. It's the same sulfur chemistry at work. Some people also point to the entourage effect here, by the way. Caryophyllene, which actually binds to CB2 receptors, works together with those VSCs and the rest of the terpene profile to help shape the overall experience. So beyond that wild smell, let's cover the rest of it. GMO is a heavily indica-leaning strain, and it hits hard. The high starts with a bit of a euphoric head buzz, then sinks into a deep, heavy, extremely relaxing body high. And it's a true nighttime strain, the kind of thing that glues you to the couch and puts you to sleep. And on top of that, it's potent, really potent, typically testing in the mid to high 20s in THC, sometimes even higher. So it's not just a novelty smell, it's strong, heavy-hitting weed. Now the way it looks matches the way it hits too, because GMO grows dense, dark green buds, often with purple hues, and on top of that, they're caked in a thick, greasy layer of frosty crystals. And that greasy, resin-heavy quality made it a favorite for making solventless hash, rosin, and concentrates. Because it's so drenched in resin and holds on to its intense smell even after being processed, it became a superstar in the high-end hash and extract world. Matter of fact, a lot of the most premium concentrates you see today are made from GMO or its relatives, precisely because that loud flavor survives the process. But besides that, GMO spread largely as a clone-only cut, meaning most of those coveted genetics passed from grower to grower through cuttings rather than seeds, which is a big part of why authentic GMO became so sought after. So let's talk about how this strain rose to the top, because its timing was perfect. GMO showed up and started winning awards in the late 2010s, including a big win at the 2017 Midwest Cannabis Cup for Best Indica Flower. That win put it on the map nationally, and cuts of it started spreading to legal markets everywhere. But its rise was about more than just awards. It arrived right in the middle of the candy era, when everything was about sweet strains like Runts and Skittles, and GMO was the complete opposite of all that. While everyone else was chasing candy, GMO offered loud, savory, gassy funk instead of sweetness. It stood out precisely because it refused to be sweet, and that made it the face of a whole different movement. Call it the gas or funk category. It was for the connoisseurs, the people who cared about pungent, intense, powerful flavor over sweet candy. GMO basically proved that a strain could smell like straight-up garlic and body odor, and instead of being gross, that could be a badge of top-shelf quality. It flipped the whole idea of what good weed was supposed to smell like on its head. For years, the goal had been sweeter and fruitier. GMO came along and proved that louder and funkier could win too. So once GMO proved how popular that funk could be, it became one of the most sought-after breeding parents in the game. Breeders everywhere started crossing it with other strains to pass on that savory, garlicky, gassy punch. And it created a whole family of funky descendants. You've got strains like garlic breath, along with a whole run of savory hybrids that people call the breath and burger families, with Donny Burger being a notable one, and it was all built on GMO's funk. Breeders crossed it with gassy strains, with candy strains, with everything. But no matter what was crossed with it, they were always chasing that garlic punch. It essentially founded a whole new branch of the cannabis family tree, the funky, savory branch that so many modern strains now belong to. And where does GMO stand today? It's a modern classic, plain and simple. It's considered one of the defining strains of that whole gas and funk category, and it's still a huge favorite among serious weed enthusiasts, and especially hash makers, and the solventless community. Its greasy, potent, pungent nature keeps it in high demand, and its genetics are now woven all through the modern weed world by way of its many descendants. So, at the end of the day, GMO is the strain that fooled everyone twice. First with its name, which makes people think of lab experiments and genetic engineering, when it was really just an inside joke about Girl Scout cookies. And second, with its smell, which by every normal rule should have been a total turnoff, all garlic and onion and funk, but instead became a symbol of the highest quality. It took the sweet cookies everyone loved, crossed it with legendary gas, and created something savory that changed what people expect from top-shelf weed. And that's the real legacy here. It proved that sometimes the best things break all the rules.